Hello, hello, hello! The more you learn about the true nature of politics, the greater the sense you get that the ruling regime of this country is fully entrenched and near impossible to get rid of. Throughout this video, and the second part to be released on Sunday, I shall detail how exactly this has happened through the focus of these 6 key points. Before I start though, I need to explain what form the establishment regime actually takes. Also, I should note that throughout this video I shall be ignoring the subject-overlord relationship Britain has with America, or indeed any other international relations, as though these are important to understand our position, they only serve to confuse the concepts I'm talking about today. Without further ado then, let's talk about the makeup of the British regime.
Ask for papers, hold meetings, propose, discuss, revise, report back, redraft.
Precisely.
As far as we on the True Right are concerned, the ruling regime of the United Kingdom, or for that matter any other Western country, can be said to be a managerial bureaucracy on behalf of capitalist interests. Somewhat ironically for the position of the True Right, this is the same view taken by the True Left, which is also an enemy of the regime. But what does this actually mean? Well, the capitalist part is easy enough to understand. In essence, power is held by those with the most money, with these people extending patronage and doing whatever else they can to ensure things are done in their best interest. This isn't the early stage capitalism of honest competition, free markets, success of the best products and services, or anything like that. Rather, it's the late stage capitalism characterised by oligopolistic power, anti-competitive action, investments into power politics, and the wielding of the state to entrench their own positions. The bureaucratic element of this is simply a tool to place obstacles in the path of entrepreneurial people of the earlier stage outlook as an effort to keep new competition and potential challengers down. The managerial element is the inevitable outgrowth of mass and scale. In the business world, whilst a startup or small enterprise can usually be run by the founders and a small team, a larger enterprise needs a system of management to operate effectively. In the Ford Motor Company, we see that the entrepreneurial spirit of Henry Ford was alive and kicking in the early days, but has now been replaced by a risk-averse managerial attitude that tends not to try new things and tends instead to only be interested in pettier bean counting. This period also typically marks the decay of such an enterprise. The same forces that turn entrepreneurial businesses into managerial businesses also apply to the capitalist state, hence why the state is now packed with petty civil servants fiddling the numbers, rather than people willing to stick their necks out with bold decisions. It's a large part of why nothing ever happens. Important to remember though is that Western regimes, including our own, are run first and foremost by managerial bureaucrats on behalf of the moneyed interests. There are of course factions within the regime who have their own agendas, such as a certain group of Middle Eastern origin whose primary concern is the advancement of their own ethnos. But even still, the regime can simply be considered as working for the merchant class, otherwise known as the capitalist class. With that in mind then, let's now look at how these elites have kept power and done so much to ensure that no rival power faction can ever come to challenge their rule.
Just believe in me.
Those familiar with the work of Nima Parvini, better known as Academic Agent, will know that he has the conception of elite ideology as essentially all being bullshit. As he puts it, any professed ideology of the ruling man or faction can simply be put as BSBS, BSBS, therefore we should rule. The point here isn't to say that whatever ideology is professed is BS, but rather that the ideology is always a tool used by those in power to justify their rule, and that the BS is not what's actually important. However, the BS is always needed for the sake of stability and the cooperation of the governed. The way that our regime justifies its power is through what we might call boomer truth. Boomer truth is the default popular understanding of the world that arose after World War II. Academic Agent has a far longer video exploring the concept of boomer truth in great detail on his channel, and I encourage you to watch that, but for the sake of time I will only cover some of the more key concepts here. The core ideas as they relate to this video's topic are that boomer truth paints National Socialism as the ultimate evil, liberal democracy is the defeater of ultimate evil, and that individualist self-expression is the ultimate good. What this means for us, though, is that we're told that having any sense of collective national identity is bad, that the past was culturally backwards and repressive, that we must consume products to become our true selves, and that we must see ourselves and everyone else as unique individuals. As far as the merchant capitalists are concerned, this is the perfect frame of mind to keep the masses contained within. Atomised individuals who lack a sense of collective identity are far easier to control. Liberal democracy is the perfect veil for capitalist oligarchy. Boomer truth is a frame designed to convince people that the system of government they are told they live in is good and everything else is evil. If you're convinced that both absolute monarchy and a dictatorship of the proletariat are evil, then all you have left is capitalist oligarchy under the guise of liberal democracy. As such, boomer truth can be seen as the disarming psychological tool that convinces people to adhere to the system most beneficial to capitalism and convinces people that this system is a natural consequence of ultimate good. Moreover, it means that even if someone did want to overthrow the system, they just end up recreating the conditions that led to the system they would be overthrowing. Gentlemen, this is Containment Manifest.
Well, let me tell you something, brother!
For the sake of those who don't know, Kayfabe is a term borrowed from professional wrestling. As everyone knows, professional wrestling is a scripted affair with planned outcomes, fabricated narratives, people whom you are meant to like and people whom you are meant to dislike. Behind the curtain though, these wrestlers are not actually enemies and they don't really want to fight each other. It is all a show. Yet, to enjoy the show, one has to switch off their real understanding and go along with the idea that all of it is actually real. The same sort of thing is also true of politics, though we are never told as such. The idea of political kayfabe takes the concept of psychological subjugation much further than that of boomer truth. Here we learn how practically all politics and practically all political activism is essentially a smoke and mirrors trick designed to obscure beyond comprehension the true operation of power. Thankfully, the concept of the uni-party, wherein all political parties are essentially the same thing, has been around for long enough that a lot of people now see it to be true. As a matter of fact, this state of affairs has been true for at least decades. We are told that the goal of different political parties is to win seats against other political parties and then pursue independent policies once in government. Yet, the actual truth is that all major political parties work for the same moneyed interests with people from the same institutional backgrounds who believe and want the same broad things and are on the same political track. But why would the regime do this at all? Well, firstly, it benefits the regime to give people an outlet to think that they are making real change, even if they're only fighting ghosts. And secondly, the frequent change in policy and direction, which always serves to re-engage people in politics and give them hope for a better future, would seem downright schizophrenic if it came from one single group. The far more plausible and palatable way to do this is through a change in party and leader. In terms of kayfabe though, these are the pretend rivals you are meant to back. You are meant to cheer for the blue guy to win or cheer for the red guy to win. You are meant to forget that both red and blue are costumes worn by guys on the same establishment team. This also manifests itself outside of party politics. Pundits, celebrities, organisations and activists are all meant to play the roles of good guy or bad guy, usually depending on which side you think you're on. To use more pro-wrestling terms, the good guys, called faces, are meant to distract you by getting you to support them, whilst the bad guys, called heels, do the same thing by baiting your anger. I mean, think of the typical outrage that can be generated from random forms of petty wokeness. You, as a guy on the right, think that this new wokeness is an outrage and that we are in clown world. And so, dozens of political pundits are making the exact same point, and you are cheering them on. Meanwhile, on the other side, they think that it was only ever a kind gesture, and that the right's response is yet another show of intolerance and bigotry from them. You cheer on your guys and boo their guys, they cheer on their guys and boo your guys. All the while, you're wasting your time engaged in a pretend system rather than building power of your own, and the same people who were in power before are still in power now. Additionally, in real life, things are not always on a clear left-right spectrum, but the kayfabe of politics tries to tell you that this or that thing is either right-coded or left-coded. You are never the one to decide what your team supports or not. You are told by pundits, think tanks, the media, or fellow brainwashed people that the enemy side believes this or that, and that your side believes the opposite, or something to that effect. Thus, people on the right are convinced that the left are the real racists, and that we should return to colourblind liberalism, something which ultimately serves the interest of the capitalists seeking the cheap, loyal foreign workforce. Meanwhile, people on the left are told that they must defend freaks, dysgenics, degenerates, and whatnot from the oppressive bigots on the right, something that weakens them and makes them out to be unlikable clowns. And so, like the bull chasing down the red cloth rather than the actual matador, the real agents of power are left unchallenged and unknown, and people are only ever fighting fake enemies. Lastly on this point, part of the kayfabe is always the fan support. Quite often in wrestling, the wrestler will encourage the participation of the fans or appear to defer to their judgment. The fans, who dutifully cheer or boo, can then feel as though they've done their bit. So too is this the case in politics. Through framing devices such as the shifting of the Overton window, educating the masses, winning in the marketplace of ideas, or other rhetorical victories, the ignorant masses get to feel as though they are foot soldiers in the fight against wokeness, or the fight against Nazism, or the fight against whatever nonsense it is on that given day. But these are not real victories. The balance of true power has not changed, the elites have not been removed, the incentives have not changed, and nobody is any closer to getting the lasting outcomes that they actually want. It's all for show, and none of it is real. For the capitalist elite, this is perfect. They allow people to feel like they've achieved something whilst they've actually achieved nothing at all. At most, all it encourages the regime to do is have mass immigration under Boris Johnson, rather than mass immigration under Tony Blair. Same crap, different colour tie. And even when we are promised a real change, it's only a change from some form of liberalism to another form of liberalism, both of which ultimately serve capitalist interests. And that's all. If the people are only ever spending their time fighting shadows, the regime can rest assured that they were never at any risk whatsoever. Sure, they may be unpopular, but unpopularity alone does not boot one out of office. It seems to me that there is no limit to what people will fall for, and there is always a deeper frontier from which you can misdirect people. Rhetorical battles, political battles, or any sort of battle encouraged by the mainstream media, right or left, simply isn't real and simply isn't worth your time. End of story.
Food is going up in price, gas and electricity, the council tax, the rent.
Lastly for part 1 is the topic of cultural decay. It seems obvious enough that the readiness with which rival factions can gain power, utilise it, fight for what they believe in, and do practically anything else within the realm of human activity depends heavily on the quality of the real people who are doing such things. Unfortunately for us, we are not even half the men our ancestors were. Modern men are today weak, fat, lazy, smug, compliant, dependent, mentally ill, and in so many other ways totally pathetic. Whilst in the past we venerated the Chad, the jock, the handsome athletic man, we are these days told that such a man is stupid and shallow, and that we should instead look to the virgin nerd or the feminine gay boy. Even supposed dissidents against the regime like Andrew Tate promote a view of masculinity that is not wholesome, productive, conducive to high trust, high competence civilizations, or geared towards producing good fathers. Instead, Tate and the gym bros preach a view of masculinity that is hedonistic, materialistic, and degenerative. On the other hand, women are encouraged to be hypergamous artificial slags hooked on whatever the latest beauty or makeup trends are, which frankly make them look more like embalmed corpses than the fruit of the human species. Women, like many men, are also now far more inclined to develop mental health issues, as they are encouraged to compare themselves to every other woman on the internet. And so too are they sold a definition of success that would more traditionally suit that of men. The very sort of careerist success that ultimately serves the interest of, guess whom, the capitalist elites. The point of all of this isn't to resuscitate some notion of the culture war, but instead to point out that much of our nation is feeble, foolish, and dependent on state support. At the end of the video for part 2, which will come out on Sunday, I'll talk about how this decay can actually represent an opportunity, as high quality stands out better when the average is so low. But for now, it means that the basis of the power of the masses, whenever someone comes along to organise them into something useful, has been drastically reduced. Our ruling elites, whose only threats, realistically speaking, would only ever come from within the nation, would far rather be governing a nation of people who are weak than a nation of people who are strong. And make no mistake, this cultural decay has been intentionally architected by the elites, downstream of policies they have implemented, and ideas they have spread. Our cultural decay was not all an accident, it was not always inevitable, but it was instead yet another way in which the elites have subdued the nation. Anyway, that's all for part 1. Do come back on Sunday for the second part, wherein I talk about the hard power side of things, including the efforts taken by capital against labour power, the offshoring of much national industry, the unnavigable obstacles to success created by bureaucracy, and finally how we might still have a chance despite all of this. If you want to support me, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee page, and any amount there will be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, please like, subscribe, and don't let the bastards grind you down.